can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here today and introduce this particular event, which is an event on a red letter day for the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute. It's the 10th anniversary, our 10th anniversary, which you're helping us to celebrate. On the 7th of October, 2008, Elias Khoury, our friend and the great Arab writer and intellectual, came and was interviewed for our first event. In the old days, we met at Al Ma'moura, up on 15th Street, in the building that is the headquarters of the EAA. And I interviewed him on that day, but today I did one better, or many steps better, and got Bilal to agree to interview Elias. So we're delighted to celebrate this day with the return of Elias to the podium. It seemed the most appropriate thing, and I'm so glad that Elias agreed to come all the way from Beirut, as did Bilal, in fact. But I'll introduce you to Bilal, and he'll introduce Elias in a minute. If you indulge me, I would like just to read a statement we've prepared about the Institute. It's hard to say all the things we'd like to say about it succinctly, so I will read this rather engaging text. In the fall of 2008, the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute began its programming in Abu Dhabi, making it the first unit of the university on the ground in the UAE. During its early years, the Institute served as the vanguard of the nascent NYU Abu Dhabi, offering various programs aimed at increasing the visibility of the institution and advancing the intellectual endeavors of the new project. With the opening of NYU Abu Dhabi in the fall of 2010 and the arrival of students and faculty on the ground, the Institute took its place, as always intended, as the university's hub of scholarly and creative activity, the latter of which, of course, it now shares with the Arts Centre. Today, the Institute is a cornerstone of NYU Abu Dhabi's academic excellence and the principal centre for the institution's public and scholarly outreach programs. Through its major academic conferences, research workshops, talks, and film screenings, the Institute provides forums about cultural, historical, artistic, and scientific themes having global significance, as well as special relevance for Abu Dhabi and curricular development. The Institute also forms an intellectual and programmatic link across NYU's global network university and bridges and creates knowledge communities across the globe. All of these efforts have enriched the faculty and student experience, the local community's exposure to vitally new ideas, as well as the advancement of research and innovation throughout the academic world. The Institute has established to date networks of collaboration and cooperation with local, regional, and global individuals and organizations, leading scholars, practitioners, and public intellectuals from a variety of disciplines and geographies have been featured prominently in the steady stream of programs that have become a hallmark of NYU Abu Dhabi's evolving enterprise in Abu Dhabi. The Institute's trajectory of accomplishment can be measured by the robust scale of its programs, by its ever-growing reach to scholarly and public audiences and professional constituencies, and by the extraordinarily high-caliber intellectual content of programs, which we hope and anticipate will continue to grow over the Institute's second decade and beyond. I'd like to say a word now just about the exhibition. You came in this way, but as you leave the discussion at the end of the session, we invite you to exit that way and to peruse, have a look at the exhibition of photos that has been prepared as part of the celebration for today. And I'd like to thank Woodman Taylor, as well as his designer, Luis Castañeda, for curating that exhibition, which is a lot of fun. It's more, you saw the film, it's more of the same, but it's also a very interesting. Just a few words, if I may make some personal comments. I don't want to keep you long. I know you want to hear Elias and Bilal discuss literature. So just a few personal remarks from my 10 years of directing the Institute. The first remark I'd like to make is that I'm very pleased that in that exhibition, Hilary Ballon features large in one of the photos, and there's, of course, a biography of her, the late Hilary Ballon, who was such a driving force in the founding of the Institute and its vision from the get-go in 2007, in fact. She was the first person I ever heard mention the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute. And when I questioned whether it was the right time to do it back in 2007, because there was no one on the ground to do it, she said, more or less looking me level in the eyes, as she had a want to do, well, why don't you go out and do it? So what have we done at the Institute? Well, we've done anything from dark matter to UAE archaeology, and it's impossible for me to pick out highlights, anecdotal highlights. But I just want to share one or two. I remember very well in the second event when Glynis Farrar, who founded the Center for Cosmology at NYU, came here for a discussion of Stephen Hawking's A Briefer History of Time. She managed to get Stephen, who was a friend of hers, I say Stephen, but using Glynis's voice, she managed to get Stephen Hawking to produce a recording of Welcome. So we heard that robotic and American voice of Stephen Hawking addressing the audience in Abu Dhabi, addressing the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute, saying how excited he was to be a part of the conversation about his book translated into Arabic. And he did also mention that he hoped to be here one day. Other memories I have, and I won't list them all, but I do remember quite vividly the occasion when Nicholas Rajewski came to talk about Beethoven, and the title was, what can genomics tell us about the musical genius of Beethoven? And the very specialized answer to the question was practically nothing. Which meant that the first half of the lecture was a very instructive arrival at that nothing. What he did say was that the way to learn about Beethoven's music is to listen to his music. So this great genomicist or geneticist then proceeded to play the piano like Edward Said would have played the piano, and played the 30th sonata of Beethoven. Explaining how if you listen to the music, that's how you get to the genius of Beethoven. And there are many other memories, but just one more. When last year Omar Rubash came to talk about his book, which had just been published, Letters to a Young Muslim, letters that he wrote to his son, we had a packed audience who came to listen to its local literary hero. And what I remember about that event is the post-event reception, where he spent 2 hours signing books for a young Emirati audience. These young Emirati students were so excited to hear Omar Rubash. He spent at least 3 minutes with each and every one of them, and it was it drove home what the Institute's all about, bringing the community together and creating excitement about new ideas, new books, distinguished speakers. So without further ado, and again reiterating my welcome and excitement about you being here on this 10th anniversary, I'd like to introduce tonight's event, a conversation with Elias Khoury. Elias Khoury, back in the day, back in 2008, came to talk on the 10th anniversary of the publication of his Bab Shams, Gate of the Sun. And so now, 10 years later, he's going to share with us some thoughts about the evolution, can I say, the development, new trends in Arabic literature since then. And he's going to be interviewed by Bilal Orfali, his colleague from Beirut. Bilal is chairperson and associate professor of Arabic studies at the American University of Beirut, and previously held the MS Sophia Chair in Arabic Studies at the Ohio State University. He specializes in Arabic literature, Sufism, and Quranic studies. And his recent publications include, and he has many of them, The Anthologist's Art, The Book of Noble Character, The Comfort of the Mystics, Sufism Black and White, In the Shadow of Arabic, and he's co-editor of Brill's series Texts and Studies on the Quran, co-editor of Brill's Encyclopedia of Islamic Mysticism, co-editor of Al-Abhath, and serves on the board of several journals, book series, and academic projects across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. He has a BS in mathematics, a BA and MA in Arabic language and literature from the American University of Beirut, again, and an MPhil and PhD in Arabic studies from Yale universities, where he's often to be seen in the Beinecke Library searching out rare manuscripts. He's one of the foremost editors of medieval Arabic manuscripts in the world, and it's a great pleasure to have you here today, Bilal. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phil. I would like to start by reminding myself first and everyone else in the room to turn off their cell phones. It gives me great pleasure to be here first and to welcome our honored guest, the celebrated Lebanese novelist and public intellectual Elias Khoury. Khoury plays a major role in the Arabic cultural scene and in the defense of the liberty of expression and democracy. Khoury, an author of more than a dozen novels, many are translated to numerous languages, was the editor of Mulhaq al-Nahar and author also of numerous critical essays and political, I should say, essays published in various newspapers and journals in the Arab world. Khoury, of course, needs no introduction, and especially at this institution and to this learned audience. Novelist Khoury took the stage at NYU Abu Dhabi Institute 10 years ago today, leading the first of hundreds of conferences and events to be held at the Institute. Khoury returns as a reminder of what the Institute has achieved in a decade. Please join me in welcoming our honored guest, Elias Khoury. In 10 years, of course, the Institute has grown in significant ways. But in these 10 years, the Arab world has been caught between vicious wars, failed revolutions, exile, and waves of refugees. We in the Arab world live in the time of the collapse of values, collapse of meanings, the collapse of order and authority, but also the collapse of resistance as well. Elias, and this is a question for you, what is the role, or is there a role for literature today in this chaos?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Phil. I'm really very, very touched to come to this gathering and the 10th anniversary of this great work. I knew Phil when he began this work, and I knew how much he had put energy and enthusiasm and intellectual approaches. And I'm really proud to be with you all and proud to be speaking to you. Of course, I'm not proud of the situation that my friend and colleague Bilal described. He's putting me in a corner beginning with the toughest question that ever can be asked in a moment of despair, let's say, in the Arab world, and of despair in the Arab cultural scene, actually. What is the role of a writer? I really don't know. All what I know is that the writer has to write. And in writing, writing itself is a double act. First of all, it's an act of love. You cannot write if you do not love what you are writing about. And in the situation where, in the Arab world, where hatred is dominating, I come from a country which was devastated by a civil war for 15 years, with 120,000 people who were killed. And during the Lebanese civil war, we never realized that it was only a small rehearsal of the destiny of the region. And unfortunately, the Lebanese civil war is nothing to be compared with the disasters that took place afterwards. When the Arab Spring was destroyed, and it was destroyed by multiple reasons. I don't want to enter through that, but the counter-revolution and despotism won. Now, at least for the time being, won the battle. But what is winning a battle like this, with millions of refugees, with hundreds of thousands of people who are killed, with blood that is surrounding us everywhere, with forgetting, and this is a major issue, with forgetting the Israeli occupation and what the Israelis are planning and are executing nowadays in Palestine, especially after the law of nationality, which is declaring Israel as an apartheid regime in the region, or in the international situation where what is becoming dominant is a vulgar language and is a new type of, let's say, not fascism, but it's very near to fascism. I'm afraid to say, where values are destroyed. Since the Second World War, the whole human experience was an attempt to build values of respect, values of equality, values of dignity, and especially in the anti-colonial movement. Nowadays, all these values are disappearing. And we have to face a fact which we never thought we will face, a fact that the world can change to the worst. This idea that the world is going forward is proved to be meaningless. The world can go anywhere. It's up to us to decide where we will take it or not. In this sense, the first thing in writing is, as I said, love. Love to the others. Love to the people you are writing about. Love to your characters. And here it's not. I'm not speaking about love just in general. I'm speaking about concrete love. It's a concrete personal experience that if you are a writer and you do not go through it, you will never arrive to achieve what I think is something profound. And in this love affair is very complex, because in love there is always cheating. we cheat our characters and they cheat on us. There is always separation. There are always difficulties. And I remember once I was giving a speech after the Gate of the Sun. It was in the university in Paris, and one woman came and asked me to tell her more about Nahila. Nahila is the major character of the Gate of the Sun, saying that she told me, you must have known this woman. Of course, what you have written is, of course, part of her life, but I want to know more about her. I told her, Madam, if I have met this woman, I would not have written this book. I would have married her. So it's real love. On the other hand, writing is an act of resistance. Yeah. To resist in the sense, in a major sense. I'm not speaking about political writing. I write political articles all the time. But when I write a novel, I go to somewhere, to a different place. this place is to resist through language, in the sense that through giving meaning to language. What we are facing nowadays is a terrible moment where words are losing their meaning. And I think the major role of a writer is to give words back their meanings. Not only to invent new meanings, which of course this is part of any writing process, but to give words their meanings, to give words back their respect. Words are said in any way. Just look at any speech of President Trump, and you will realize that words are flying without meaning. He can say this man can say anything, and he is the leader of the biggest superpower. He is the leader of the empire of our times. So the problem, and this I said about Trump, but it can go through all popular culture, through many domains, and especially in the Arab world. In the Arab world, where words with the types of dictatorships we are living under became totally meaningless. They speak about freedom in order to open prisons. They speak about liberation in order to enslave people. So giving the words back their meaning is the act of resistance in writing. In this sense, I suppose that the writer has a role. It's a small role, of course. Maybe it's not very important, but don't expect that a novel can make a revolution. Novels or poems never made revolutions and never changed the world. Novels and poems and all creative writings change the writing itself. That is, change our perspective. And when our perspective is changed, then something can happen, but in the long run. So you see, it's if you are writing and you are waiting an outcome, you will be in a total despair. You have to accept the fact that you write and you don't know what will happen with what you are doing.
Thank you, Elias. You've actually touched on many of the themes that I would like to discuss today: the state of despair, the Lebanese civil war, characters, audience, the author, writing and resistance, and language. And I don't know really where to start from now, but I would like to start with a personal question that I've always wanted to ask you. Can we separate between Elias Khoury, the political activist, and Elias, the adib, the literature, the writer? Are these?
You know, to tell you the truth, I don't know both of them. I would like.
Nice.
I would really. I'm not joking. I mean. The act. First of all, I write articles. I'm not a political writer, and I'm not a political leader, and I do not work in politics.
You're a commentator.
Yeah, of course. But I write. I make comments, and I think this is my role as a citizen.
Okay.
That is, this is what all of us must do, and those between us who can write, they have to do this in order to feel that we are acting in our social life, and we are trying to say the truth. So the political writing, the idea of political writing, is to say the truth. Now, Edward Said have put it, say the truth to the power. Of course. I'm more humble. Edward was my idol and my professor. I'm more humble. I would put it like this: is to say the truth as much as we can reach the truth. While the novelist is not supposed to say the truth. You know, we Arabs. You know this better than me, Bilal.
عذب الشعر أكذبه.
أيوة عذب الشعر أكذبه. The term of kazib, of lie, was used by the Arab critiques as a synonym of the metaphor. So the most beautiful poem is the Akzabuhu, how to say this in English, is
The most untruthful.
the most untruthful. But actually, writing a novel is not to tell the truth,
Yeah.
but it is to discover the truth through other ways.
Yeah.
So the material you have is imagination, whereas in an article, the material you have is reality. In literature, the material you have is imagination, and you have to make from this imagination real. And here, I would like to tell this story, which I love very much, which is the story that touched me the most in all my career as a writer. It was in December 2014. A group of young, about 250, 300 young men and women in Palestine went and occupied a place which was called Area E1, which is near in the outskirts of Jerusalem. E1 was confiscated by the Israeli occupying army to build a settlement. So these young people went and occupied the area and built a village with tents, of course, and they called the village Bab Shams, the gate of the sun. And the most touching moment was the next day when all these young people gathered around fire, and I saw them through Skype, and they were reading from my novel. And at that moment, of course, the village was destroyed. Our cousins, they don't tolerate.
But you became an honorary citizen of the village, right?
Yeah, yes, of course, yeah. Which is no more. I mean, but at least now I can claim my right to return to Palestine because I have a village. It's a real right. But the most important thing in that is, to my knowledge, this was the only time, maybe one of the rare times, that imagination becomes reality. Normally, writers use reality to create imagination. Here, an imaginative village, because Bab Shams in the novel is a cave where the two lovers, Yunus, coming from Lebanon, he's Palestinian, of course, from Galilee, who was infiltrating the Israeli borders to meet his lover, Nahila. And they created a small country. They called it country, which in a cave in a village, in the village of Deir al-Asad, and they called it the Gate of the Sun. Now this village, of course, after 3 days was destroyed. The Israeli army came and destroyed it and took the guys, many of them, to jail. But the village was recreated 3 times. And the third time, the name of the village was the grandsons of Yunus. Yunus is the other main character of the novel. And for me, this meant that sometimes, it's very rare, but sometimes literature can become reality. And sometimes our imagination can push people to create something new. And I thought this action of these young Palestinian men and women was very innovative, was very creative. Politically, it was very creative. And of course, for me, it was the biggest prize any writer can have.
Yes. I've been following your writings about the Syrian tragedy and the Syrian people. And I know exactly your position. And I want to read a quotation first. You say in an article in Al-Quds Al-Arabi in 2012, that was 6 years ago, of course, describing the tragedy of the Syrians, and I translate, alone, they defend the dignity of man in all the lands of the Arabs. And alone, they bring back with their blood shed the human and moral meaning of politics. What should I say to you? You say, you who are alone, Your aloneness compares only with the aloneness or loneliness of the Palestinian people. So this link that you make between Syria and Palestine, the Syrians and the Palestinians, I have a number of questions here. Is pain universal? Is the victim one and the same in as much as the persecutor one and the same? And then will you write, or do you think about writing about Syria and the Syrians in the way you wrote about Palestine and the Palestinians?
No, I'll begin with the last question because it's the easiest. Bilal, I did not write about the Palestinians. I wrote with the Palestinians. It's totally different. I mean, of course, many things in my novels related to Palestine, especially Gate of the Sun, and then My Name is Adam, The Children of the Ghetto, which is coming now in England in English. I speak about places which I never visited, practically. But it was a way for me to know things which I didn't know. That is to travel, because writing is a kind of a voyage. Since our Sindibad, Sindibad used to make his trips in order to come back to Baghdad to tell stories. Actually, of course, he was interested in making these voyages, but the major reason of traveling was to tell stories. So in this sense, I made these travels to write stories, but I wrote with my experience with the Palestinians, the same way as I wrote about the Lebanese civil war and Beirut and so on, because this is my personal experience. So there is something related to a knowledge accumulated through time. Now, Syria is a huge wound, and it will stay a huge wound in the Arab world. I don't know if I have the ability to have the possibility to live this type of experience, which normally I do when I write something, but I hope I can write something, because here also Syria and the disaster of Syria, because in Syria there was a revolution, a popular revolution, which was destroyed, which was faced by a military in a very savage way by the army, and then something happened in Syria, which is the revolutionaries themselves were totally separated, became totally outsiders, because new forces coming from different places, and here I'm speaking about the Islamists on both sides, because those who went to help the Syrian regime were Islamists, because it's not only Daesh or Islamists, the others also are Islamists. And of course the Sunni Islamism, both came to destroy the Syrian possibility of creating a democracy. Now, why this happened? I'm so sorry to say, but I feel that it's our fault. It's the fault of people like us. This is what happened in Egypt also. There was a great revolution in Egypt, a model to the world, this Midan al-Tahrir thing, which was destroyed practically by this alternation between the army and the Muslim Brotherhood. The same thing happened in Syria in a different way and in a more savage way. And people like us, who are seculars, who are Democrats, and so on, if they were not imprisoned by the regime, they were imprisoned by the Islamists. So when I think about the Syrian revolution and about the Syrian hope, I really feel hopeless.
And I meant also, of course, the refugees and the exile.
No, of course. Now you have 6 million.
The stories.
No, 6 million Syrian refugees outside Syria, 4 million Syrian refugees inside Syria. You have 10 million refugees out of a population of 22 million.
10 million stories.
No, it's terrible. I mean, not stories. It's terrible, and you have not a repetition of Palestine. Of course, you cannot compare. I don't like this comparison. But something as terrible, maybe as the Palestinian thing, although this time it's more painful. Because it's more painful because since 1948, these military regimes came to power with their promise to liberate Palestine. They not only did not liberate Palestine, they destroyed Palestine, but also they destroyed our societies. So I think nowadays in the Arab world, we feel that we have to begin from zero. I have the feeling that my grandfathers of the late 19th, early 20th century felt when they were trying to build the new Arab consciousness at the moment of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the European invasions of the region. We are in a moment which is very similar, but it's more difficult, I think. It's more difficult because the hope that our ancestors had, we do not have. We have to invent also this hope.
Thank you. I would like to go now into a part where I discuss with you the process of writing itself,
okay.
Rather than the content of your novels. You already mentioned Sindibad, right? How does the story begin, and where does the story come from? These are central questions in your literature. You are a writer concerned with form who reflects deeply on storytelling and the process of storytelling. It is perhaps in this sense that you say that you are a student of the Arabian Nights. I've heard you say this before. In your literature, stories never end. Stories are born from stories, just like Shahrazad's stories. The beginning of the story, however, is the frame. And the question of the beginning is also the question of finding the frame and discovering meaning. And you just said also today that the writer needs to create the meaning or give value or meaning to the words. Your novel, Children of the Ghetto, My Name is Adam, now available in English and will be signed next week, I think, in Cambridge. So it's now available in English. So this novel is a perfect example of this. It is a novel that was described as not a novel in which the writer is both reader and interpreter. Why did you choose this form to write about the Palestine today? My question, so have we exhausted the story that to talk about the story is to talk about a way to narrate the story? Is there another way, in your opinion, to approach the question of Palestine today?
Look, Bilal, there are always other ways. I mean, there is not only, there will never be one way, otherwise we will be in a disaster. My way is one of these other ways. And of course, I respect all the other approaches. Actually, I'm a student in the Palestinian field of people like Emil Habibi and Ghassan Kanafani and Jabra Ibrahim Jabra, whom I write totally in a different way from them. Nothing to do with them. But I think they learned me a lot. And they spoke, and they were the first to formulate the idea of Palestine in the novel, the same way as Mahmoud Darwish did to formulate the idea of Palestine in poetry. Now, the major issue in this new novel was how to make silence speak. This was the big, because my hypothesis was, the novel is taking, of course, for many of you who didn't read it, you'll read it hopefully in 1 month when it will be available in English everywhere. The novel is about a special event that took place in Palestine in July, August, September 1948. There was a city, the city of Lidda, which the airport now, if any one of you go to Tel Aviv, you will go to Ben Gurion Airport. This was the airport of Lydda. So this small city of about 20,000 inhabitants, of course, during the war of 1948, its population became 50,000 because of refugees pouring into it from all the surrounding villages. This village was occupied by the Israeli army in July, in the 13th of July 1948. And in that city happened one of the biggest massacres of Palestine, of the War of Palestine. And there was a clear order from Ben Gurion to kick the population out. So the 50,000 were sent out walking in the wilderness, and many of them died from thirst because it was very hot. And in that city was left a small community around the big mosque, the Cathedral of St. George, and the hospital. And in this place, there was something like 500 people. The Israeli army put barbels we say, wires, put wires, and imprisoned these people in that small area of Lydda. And the inhabitants of this small area heard from the Israeli soldiers that they are living in a ghetto. They have never heard the term ghetto before, and they thought that the term ghetto meant the place of the Palestinians. This experience was a terrible experience, which was never written about, which took me a long time to collect the stories of it. But while entering this situation, I realized that these victims were, I don't know if I can use the term absolute victims, but let's say total victims. They were totally helpless. And when you are in such a situation of victimization, it's very difficult to speak. So when I saw some of the people who lived the experience of the ghetto of Lydda, it was nearly impossible to make them tell me stories what happened in the ghetto, because silence covered them. And this happens actually to victims. This is what the Jews who went through the terrible experience of the concentration camps witnessed in Poland, for example, because in the novel I work a lot about the ghetto of Warsaw also. Right. And so silence becomes dominant. So how to make silence speak? This is the major question. That is, to enter deeply more inside the tragedy, not to speak about the tragedy as if I am describing it from outside. In The Gate of the Sun, the form I played with was to put Yunus in coma. So he cannot speak, so he's in silence. But there is someone who is telling the story, who is Khalil, who is his adoptive son, let's say. And he tells the stories of Yunus, because Yunus couldn't speak. Now, actually, I couldn't find a Khalil. Everybody is silenced. So how to make this silence speak? And the form that came out was to make a story about this issue. That is, the story is questioning, not only storytelling, but questioning all stories. And in this sense, questioning literature. It's questioning Ghassan Kanafani. It's questioning Emil Habibi. It's questioning Amos Oz. It's questioning many other writers. And trying to find a way to link the silence of the victims with a way of expressing, giving them the possibility to express their experience. And I think this is the major difficulty in this. This is a first volume of a trilogy, This was the biggest problem of this question of the first volume. Now, questioning writing gave the writer, who is not me actually, the writer who is Adam Dannoun, and the story tells that I found the manuscript. The manuscript was given to me from a student of mine at NYU, because at that time, when I began writing this novel, I was a professor at NYU, New York. And Adam is writing. He began by trying to write a metaphor, a novel about Waddah al-Yaman, a poet of the Abbasid time, of the Umayyad time, who died because of love. And then he discovered. And then when he knew his real story, because he never knew that he was not the son of his mother, that he was someone found him on the breast of his dead mother when the people were getting out from Lidda. So when he discovered this, and he was 55 years old, he thought that writing a metaphor is meaningless, because he became a metaphor. Mm. His problem was, and the big question he's asking himself all the time, am I a metaphor? If I tell this story, then they will say, this is a metaphor about Palestine. Whereas he is not a metaphor. So he's trying to formulate his story through engaging with questioning.
This is what I meant about finding framed story.
But this was the only way. If you are afraid from becoming a metaphor, and you are actually, your story will be read, whether you like it or not, will be read as a metaphor, then there is a big problem. And how he will try to get out of that, and I think getting out of that was one of the major not techniques, let's say, approaches used was, there are two major approaches used. The first one was the personality of Ma'mun the blind, who is his friend, who is like his father, and who is the blind man who saw everything which other people never saw. So you need to become blind in order to see what's happening, which reminds us of ألف ليلة وليلة لو كتبت بالإبر على مآق البصر. You see, in every time Shahrazad finishing a story, she will tell if it was written with needles on the pupils of the eyes, which makes you blind. So in order to understand, you must become blind, or through the mother, who couldn't cry and never spoke. I wouldn't.
So this is the first in the trilogy, right?
Yes.
Okay, the second one will have a different...
The second is coming out now in December. So you read it in Arabic.
It's a different technique, or?
Totally.
Okay. So I have so many questions, and I'm running out of time, and I would like to take a few questions from the audience. So
that's all?
I'll skip. If I want to talk about language, right? And
yes.
it's important. You are the rare combination of an eloquent speaker and a writer. In your novels...
Of what?
Eloquent speaker.
Yes.
You just saw that.
Thank you. And
a writer.
Thank you.
Right. So in your novels, as you tell stories, we experience the rare seamless combination of literary and vernacular language. Right, your translator even once said that in the middle of the translation, he realizes that, he's been translating vernacular, right? And he wasn't aware of this. Could you reflect on the use of language in your novels? Do you do it consciously?
The most beautiful story about this happened when I published White Masks, which is a novel published in 1981. I was very, very young. Even younger than you, Bilal.
I'm not that young.
You look very young. Anyway.
Thank you.
And a teacher gave it to her class in a secondary school, in the high school. And then she asked me to come to see the students and to discuss with them. And the students couldn't say, because I entered before discussing, I told them, close the books. Now tell me, it was written in classical Arabic or vernacular Arabic. They couldn't tell. Mm. And I thought this was the biggest, and I felt I felt that the mission was done. That is how to put together, because we are living, we have for me, I love Arabic language, and I think this is Arabic. I'm not with this.
No, of course, it's one language.
No, these tendencies that say that we have to make this spoken classical. I don't know this meaningless thing.
Different registers of the same language.
Different meaningless things. These meaningless things, as if their model is the English or the French. The Italians have 2 languages, 10 languages. The Germans have 20 languages. No, I'm not from that tendency. The thing is how to put, because we are writing a novel, and the novel is something new. Now, if you go back to 1001 Nights, which is our model of writing stories, and my personal model, of course, and I think it's the greatest book human race wrote. In 1001 Nights, they play on these 2 registers. You jump from the classical Arabic to the spoken Arabic, and then you go back to the classical. You put them together because you have to tell a story, and you have characters who speak, and you cannot do so without playing on these 2 registers, which for me can be of a great use in innovating the language.
Yeah.
Now, for example, I knew by hazard. I was in Yemen once, and the description of rain in Yemenite, in Arabic, and the spoken Yemenite is, they say, shanin al-matar. This is how rain comes in our countries. Because still, I used this then, afterwards. I used this in one of my novels. Because before that, we used to say, naqr al-matar. But actually, the rain comes like a shanin. And so, learning from other dialects in the Arab world will enrich our language and will make us able to write the way we live. It's very important that our life and our writing be one and the same. The last thing in 1001 Nights, which also I use, is that they refer from time to time to poetry, as if poetry comes to give the meaning, the exact meaning, which the narrative cannot give. And I think this is very important in the technique of storytelling.
Technique from Ayyam al-Arab, also, by the way. This is a nightmare to your translator, right?
No. Normally, my translators, and my English translator, Humphrey Davis, who works also, who made, actually, the one who translated Ahmad Faris Shidyaq, will not find me difficult, but no, normally I work I only know French and English, so I work with my English and French translators, and it was all the time very interesting to work together, and their reactions were very, very.
Do you read your novels in English?
I read them while yes, I read the draft after in English and in French. Thank God I do not know other languages, so I have nothing to do with other translations.
And you've been happy in general? Do you think the translator gives the meaning you intended?
I don't know what I intended after time. This is not the issue. The issue is that, in translation you lose something. Of course.
It's alienating.
No, lose. The text will lose.
Or gains.
By definition. But if the text cannot lose, I say 40% of its meaning and still stay relevant, then it's not only irrelevant to be read in English, it's also irrelevant to be read in Arabic. So this loss, I've read the major literary works in translation. How did we read the Russian Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, for example, or Brecht, or the Epic of Gilgamesh, or the Iliad? Translation is a way to show us that there is one human experience, and this is very important.
Yeah.
And which is of course represented through literature.
I have a question that's close to my heart, and I know your heart as well. In your critical pieces reflecting on the Lebanese wars, civil wars in particular, of course, you hold that the generation, I think it was an article in Al-Abhath, the journal
Yes.
that I edit now, you hold that the generations following the wars of the 19th century Lebanon did not write about these wars. On the contrary, they tried to cover them, to efface them from the collective memory altogether. And this, of course, culminates in the songs of Fairuz on Lebanon, the mountain and the sun and the moon and the beautiful Lebanon, the green Lebanon, etc. And you also, and you say that this is why the wars were repeated later, because we did not talk about them. So you hold that your generation did and is doing the opposite. They say things as they are and write about the ugly presence with all its contradictions. So my question is, do you think that the Lebanese novel has succeeded in this, in writing the civil war? And if so, why are we still repeating these wars?
First, I think the Lebanese novel succeeded in becoming a novel. I mean, at becoming let's say, a literary wave, because before the novels written after '75, of course, we had novels in Lebanon. We had great novelists like
Yusuf Awad,
Yusuf Habs al-Ash'ar, but we didn't have a novelist atmosphere. The atmosphere was totally poetic atmosphere, was totally dominated by poetry. What the new Lebanese novel succeeded in doing was to create the novel. That is, and it succeeded in creating the novel because, contrary to our ancestors, whom I understand, when you come out from a savage civil war that Karl Marx called, when Karl Marx was asked wrote about the Lebanese civil war of the 19th century, he wrote about the savage tribes of Lebanon. When you deal with a sectarian war, it's shame. It's a shame how to write it. And this is why they didn't write it, and they tried to formulate this idea of national unity, nationalism, Arab nationalism, whatever. When our civil war began, we were faced by the fact that all this ideological structure was nothing, was meaningless. That this cultural structure was covering reality. And I think one of the roles of the writer is to speak with the reality, not to speak reality, because you cannot, but to make a dialogue with reality. And in this sense, and I remember once I met Emil Habibi after the publication of one of the first novels, Al Jabal al-Saghir, Little Mountain, which was actually the first novel about the Lebanese civil war. It was published in '78. Emil Habibi told me, "How dare you? You speak about Christians and Muslims." I said, "Emil, because we are Christians and Muslims. It doesn't need to be a dairy to say things like that." He said, I all the time use neutral names. I do not use neither Muslim nor Christian name. I told him, "But Emil, your name is not neutral." So the thing is, arriving to the courage to speak with this reality, I think we were able to get out from this world of مخمل,
dreamy, or I don't know.
Yeah, of this dreamy world of Akhawir Rahbani or the megalomania of Saad A'el, and to approach reality. And in this sense, now we have, for the first time, you have a big group of Lebanese novelists who, most of them are very good. Of course, they are different in their styles and their approaches and in their political affiliations, whatever. but at least they created this atmosphere which gives the society its mirror. You cannot live without a mirror or with a false mirror. So here literature gave us a mirror. Now, why the wars will continue and we wrote them, you are totally right. I mean, it seems that
we don't read.
Not only we don't read, it seems that we have an essential problem, which is sectarian politics. And without getting rid of sectarian politics, we Lebanese will stay in this vicious circle of continuing civil wars.
You just mentioned a new generation, or the people writing now. So today there is a new generation of writers exploring new ways of expression, especially when it comes to narrating the Iraqi and Egyptian present. I'm specifically thinking about Awtarid or Frankenstein في Baghdad and these novels.
Yes.
So these novelists have written works of magical realism, fantasy, rich with symbolism. How do you evaluate this new wave of literature?
I think, look, there is something very, very terrifying. I'm sorry to say this, that if you go to Syria, also the explosion of the Syrian novel took place when Syria went through ashes.
Right.
The Iraqi novel is becoming a real movement after the disaster of Iraq. And it seems that in the Arab world, contrary to the history of the European novel, which came out with the bourgeois revolution and with the industrial revolution and so on, our novel is being created in the ashes of our societies. And I think this is a major theoretical issue which must be studied. Now, when you are in this situation like that, it's very, it's natural to see all possible ways of writing, from magical realism to meta-realism to fantasy and so on, because people are searching for their language and for their mirrors. And this is very, very important. You said Frankenstein in Baghdad. I can speak about many novels in Iraq, Sinan Antoun, or in Syria, or not even a novel like Al-Qawqa'a.
It's wonderful.
Like Al-Qawqa'a, which is a novel about the story of the Tadmor prison in Syria. Tadmor prison, you cannot imagine what does it mean, Tadmor prison, where people are left in the desert and the way they are treated is unbelievable. So this novel, Al-Qawqa'a, when I first read it, I never thought of the style. The shocking reality was so huge that it's not important, the style at all. Then afterwards they realize that this was the beginning and you need a style over it in order to express this profound experience. So I think there is a huge explosion in modern Arabic literature. Unfortunately, our societies are collapsing, and we are trying to write. And I don't know this combination, how it will work, and how historians afterwards will evaluate us. But at least, as I told you, I tried, and my colleagues tried to write both with this idea of love and resistance.
My last question to you, and then we'll open the floor to the audience. In a recent lecture in Beirut, you said, we are the post-despair generation. جيل ما بعد اليأس.
Oh my God.
What is left is silence, and you reference Hamlet here. You say, as I remember, I wasn't there, but I saw the video, that 3 statements of Hamlet were influential in modern Arabic literature, and this is one of them, of course, that what is left is silence. And you talked a lot about silence also today. Silence, however, is death by default. in the same lecture, you also described the beauty of the victims. This was terrifying to me. The beauty of the victim's silence in front of their persecutor. صمت الضحية. This is what is left. So are we truly a generation of silence? This is ما بعد اليأس comes the silence. And my personal question to you, have you lost hope?
No. First of all, you have to read the lecture. The idea was, you are right. This is what I said. I mentioned Shakespeare, this major sentence in Hamlet, the rest is silence, and the interpretations of it. My interpretation that in the text of Shakespeare, the rest is silence, because he was asking Horatio to tell the story after him.
Right.
So actually there is this combination between silence and telling. That is, silence is part of the process of telling. It's not totally isolated from telling. It's not contrary to telling. Now,
so it's not the end of speech. It's the beginning.
It's the beginning. It's the end of a way of speech.
Anticipated speech.
Yeah, and yeah. Now, what I think is that, of course, we are the generation of the silence of our societies. Our societies are totally silenced. Although inside this silence there was a huge cry of hope, which was the Arabic revolutions, which was destroyed, which creates this post-despair feeling. But I think that our role is to negotiate with silence, to make silence speak. In this sense, the silence of the victims is, first of all, is much more beautiful than the existence of the perpetrators, of course. But this is not the issue. The issue is that the silence of the victims is showing us a new way how to speak. We cannot speak in the same way. We cannot have hope the same way as we had hope, because it was a mirage. We have to speak in a new way. In this sense, this silence is very, very, very important, and it represents our experience, the Arab experience, the profound experience of Bilad Sham, of Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, since the Nakba of 1948.
So في أمل. There is hope. You have hope.
I don't like the term hope. I don't think the term hope is meaningful. We have to invent another term.
Okay, thank you, Elias.
Thank you.